Welcome to Authors Revealed. I'm Becky Anderson. Boy, do we have a book that'll make you drool every night when you open it up to cook dinner. It's Melissa Clark's new book. It's called Dinner, Changing the Game. This is a book that has to be on your counter at all times. Melissa, welcome to Naperville and Anderson's.
Thank you for having me.
We have been drooling, waiting for you to get here over this book. I just wanted to tell you, my husband took one look at this book and just flipped a few pages and goes, I have to have this.
Oh, good.
And he loves to cook. And I want to tell you, it's an absolutely gorgeous book.
Thank you. Yeah, it is. They did a great job publishing it, and the photography. Beautiful,
Yeah,
right?
it's gorgeous
Shout
photography.
out to Eric Wolfinger, who did my photography.
Yeah, but I love the feel of it, and I love it the way when you open it, it will lay flat.
Yes, that was actually one of the criteria that I had for the book. Because I know when I'm cooking, and then you have to like stick your elbow in the book and make sure and you can't find the pages and they flip around. No, lying flat is, I think that is just one extra thing to get people to actually use it.
Yeah. So I wanted to know, and I don't know if this is the first time you've worked with Clarkson Potter, but they create such beautiful books.
They do.
When they do.
They do. It's been a joy.
Yeah. And like you said, the photography is absolutely stunning in this. But we're talking about a book that's been out just for a little bit over the week.
Yeah.
And you do have a lot of followers because of your New York Times column and the videos that you have that go along with your columns. What are you hearing from those who love to follow you? And I think you've probably gotten some really good comments on this book. Obviously.
Yeah, people, I mean, it's amazing to just see, I spent so long developing the recipes, and then they're in my kitchen, and when I do recipes for the Times, it's immediate response. And so I put a recipe online, I'll write my column, I'll put a recipe online, and immediately I get comments back. So I know how it's doing. But for this book, it's delayed gratification because I develop the recipes and I test them, and then I put them in a book and they go away for a couple of years, for a year while the book gets produced. And so finally, people are trying these recipes, and it's so amazing to get the feedback. They're cooking them, they're loving them, they're feeding them to their family, and that is great. Yeah.
And you got some great blurbs. It's on the inside of the cover from some very well-known chefs and cooks. And so, Ottolenghi and Michael Solomonoff and Peter Meehan.
Yes.
But and I have to agree with them. It's absolutely fabulous. My husband has already dog-eared pages, or he hasn't dog-eared, he's marked them.
Oh yeah, tell him not to fold the pages.
I know, not to fold the pages.
He should know better now.
Well, he will probably get stuff on them because a well-loved cookbook, right?
That's okay. A splattered cookbook is a loved cookbook, and that's good.
Yeah. So this whole book is about making dinner. Sometimes, as parents, or even if we don't have kids, and you've worked all day and you come home, and it's the stress of trying to figure something to make.
Yes, exactly.
And what's going to taste great? What's going to be easy? What's going to be less stressful? But how am I going to enjoy doing this and creating this dish, right? And I think this is the answer. This book is absolutely the answer. So tell us a little bit about where the seeds started to grow for the ingredients and to putting this book together.
A lot of it grew out of my column at the New York Times. I get instant feedback from readers, and my column, I write about a lot of different types of food. I'll do recipes for dinner, I'll do recipes for breakfast, for dessert, but the ones that really resonate are the ones for dinner, because people do need, they're in a constant need of dinner recipes, because you make it every day. I mean, you might skip breakfast and you can go out for lunch, or get a sandwich, but you make dinner. And that's why I wanted to help people along in that process. And so what I really wanted to do with this book was to make sure to build on techniques that people were already using. The thing that everybody does with their chicken or the pasta that they're comfortable making, and just take that and add a little something, a twist, extra, a garnish that brought the dish alive, a flavor combination that you wouldn't have thought of, maybe because you come home from work, you're exhausted, you've got your family, and the last thing you're thinking of is, will grapes go well with chicken, and that's my job. So I'm going to help you with that.
Yeah, and that picture of that roast chicken with the grapes in there.
The roast chicken with the grapes. It's so simple, and it's just, you can get all the ingredients you can get at the supermarket. There's nothing fancy. It's chicken, it's grapes, it's a little bit of fennel seed, which is fantastic, and that's the interesting flavor combination. The fennel seed, the grapes, the chicken, and then you hit it with vinegar right at the end, and the grapes get caramelly and they condense in the oven, and it's just so good. And it's not at all hard, but it's something that maybe you wouldn't have thought to do.
Yeah. And I love the beginning of the book where you list some of those ingredients that you need to have in your pantry. And a lot of those are those seasonings, adding those different herbs and seasonings that will make the difference. Because I think a lot of the way people cook, or at least even when you go to certain restaurants, that's what's missing, are those incredible flavors.
Yeah, and I think that's the key to freedom for people. If you have a well-stocked fridge and pantry with different condiments, you can just go to the store on the way, stop on the way home, pick up the protein, and then the rest of it is going to be there for you. So I always tell people to just get the things for their pantries that will last. So I love to have people buy harissa, which is a North African chili paste with spices in it, or pomegranate molasses, and just a little bit of something like that will transform your meal without you having to do any work once you buy the thing and have it. And they last forever.
Wow.
Or almost forever.
Yeah, right. So, I think people have freaked out about dinner about so long. So you talk about, in the great introduction that you have in the book, but making this time, it could be some of the best part of your day.
That's what I say.
So how do you do it, and how do you help us do that?
I think a lot of it is we get so overwhelmed after we're rushing in from work and we've got the kids and the whole thing that we forget that we actually like to cook. For those of us who do like to cook, we forget that we like to cook on the weekends, that cooking is a pleasure, that cooking can be a pleasure. And we don't give ourselves permission to carve out just 15 or 20 minutes for ourselves so that we can sit and enjoy the process and we can be in the moment. And maybe it's meditative, maybe we're chopping and we're in a groove and we're listening to music. Maybe I always have a glass of wine at my side.
Oh, that's perfect.
It's perfect. I'm usually, my husband is somewhere around, my daughter's usually in the room doing her homework, and we're together as a family doing our thing, and I'm fully engaged in the moment. And I think that I'm not worrying about work and I'm not worrying about emails. If we can just give ourselves that, it's a precious gift.
Yeah. And I think it's the whole point of, and I think Americans, we rush too much when it comes to making food or even enjoying food together. And that's where I think our counterparts in Europe and spending that time with family and the preparation and the sitting down to enjoy it and making that time.
Yes,
so
exactly.
Essential. Yeah. So, I know, I grew up, when I was growing up in the 60s or 70s, when my mother would make dinner, it would always be a protein and maybe potatoes or a vegetable. And it was probably frozen vegetables out of the freezer. And so this is a whole different way of thinking about dinner. And I know there's some people who still think of dinner that way.
Yes.
But it's so great to have these alternatives. And so one of my questions for you, and I know there's been a huge change in the way we look at food and where we get our food and what we buy.
Yes.
And also when we go out, there's a different way of looking at food. And how have you seen it change? Because you've been doing this for quite a while. And how have you seen the whole food world change? And how even farm to table or buying more sustainably, how have you seen everything change from what we used to do and cook for our families in the 50s and 60s and even into the 70s compared to what we're doing today?
Oh, we are really lucky. I think that, I think about my daughter, and she's 8, and she's growing up in a moment where everything she's eating pretty much is fresh. And like you were saying, frozen vegetables were the norm. Right. Box mixes were the norm. And we are, I think, culturally breaking free of that. I mean, not entirely, but we have so many more options. And if you want to eat whole foods, you can get them. If you want to find a farmer's market, there's a huge growing network of them all around the country, and you can get there. If you just, again, give yourself permission to drive the extra 15 minutes or whatever. And you open up a whole world when you can get amazing locally grown fresh food. So that's one way. Another way is we're also open to new flavors, different flavors from all over the world. We're interested for once in looking beyond, what's just in the supermarket, and we're branching out into gourmet stores and specialty shops. And international shops, and that's fantastic. So we have a lot of options in terms of what we're cooking for the raw ingredients and then for the condiments and for the spices, and putting that all together and putting that on the table, I think gives all of us a richer perspective.
Oh, for sure. And you know what, this book, what is so great, like you said, it's just dinner.
Yes. Oh yeah, I didn't want to mess around with lunch or breakfast.
No, and that's great. But well, it's not even dessert. So it's great that it's just dinner. Let's concentrate on this. I think this is going to become like the go-to book that everyone's going to have sitting right there on their kitchen counter. So
I hope so. I would like people to make dinner more often, and if I can help them do that with this book, then
yeah. And I love the way it's organized, because you set up, and I love the little paragraph you have before each recipe, where you give some tips or some and you write so beautifully. And you know, some cookbooks can be quite boring, but you make this exciting. And I think it has to, well, you're a creative writer, right?
Yes.
And you've been doing this for a long time, but it makes the recipe that much more exciting to jump into and to make it.
Oh,
so
good.
is that taking you a long time to get that aspect? Because I know you've written a lot of cookbooks, 32 or more, right?
Yes.
And helped other chefs write their cookbooks. So I just think what you've done with the writing on that has just been fantastic.
You know, the head notes were processed. They're harder. You know, you'd think, oh, a head note, so that's a little paragraph before each recipe. You think, well, how hard could that be to write? But it is, because each one needs to sound different, and each one needs to be somewhat engaging. You need to learn something from it, or you need to learn something about yourself or the world. You know, there needs to be a point of entry for people. And so writing those took a lot more energy than you'd think. There was a very lengthy process with my editor. She was extremely hands-on, but it was great because she really helped me, you know, develop that voice. And it's also slightly different from the voice in the column, which is much more service oriented in a way, like very much, you know, teaching and trying to get people to make the recipe. So there's a little seduction and a lot of teaching. But in the book, I wanted to also be a little more personal, a little more inclusive.
Yeah, and conversational, kind of like
exactly.
with the person who's making the recipe. Yeah. But the way it's organized, you start with chicken,
Yes.
and then you go to beef and veal and lamb and that sort of thing. But then to fish and seafood. But then you go all the way through, you know, some great vegan options and vegetarian options and eggs and all sorts of stuff. So even some of those dishes at the end of the book, you could even pair those with some of the recipes at the beginning of the book.
Yeah.
Which is so fantastic.
You know, I always say about this book that each dish in the book is meant to be your dinner. So, you know, but that can mean so many different things. I mean, maybe you want to eat chicken for dinner, but maybe you just want a big old, you got a cauliflower, and you're like, I just want to eat this cauliflower, or what can I do to make this cauliflower dinner? And then I'm going to tell you, you're going to add avocado, and you can make a yogurt dressing, and you can put it on greens and do some fried chickpeas, and it becomes this satisfying meal. And that can be great depending on how hungry you are. Now, if you need a little something, I say add a loaf of bread, or maybe you want to have, you know, a salad on the side if you're just doing a fish fillet. But what's good about the book is, it's really meant for everyday cooking. But if you want to have a dinner party, then a lot of the fuller, more vegetable forward dishes could be side dishes in the context of making a party. So it's very flexible like that.
Yeah, I love that about it. You had catered for a number of years,
Yes.
right? So that kind of career always fascinates me. So I wanted to know, how did that prepare you for what you're doing now?
Oh my gosh, I'm so grateful for what I'm doing now, so I don't have to cater. Catering's the hardest thing ever.
Yeah, right.
I always say catering is schlepping. Most of it is bringing food from one place to another, and you know, then spending some time preparing it. It's hard work. And I learned, what I really learned is I'm obsessed with cleaning up, and I really am always, and this is something I definitely learned from working in kitchens and from catering, is I clean as I go, so it's very important to do that. But when I'm developing a recipe, I am constantly thinking, can I use one less dish? Can I dirty one less pan? How do I make the cleanup easier? How do I streamline the process to get you from raw ingredient to dinner on the table in the fastest, easiest way possible? And so I'm very aware of that, and I think catering sort of started that awareness.
Right. And you've been writing and co-writing, like we mentioned before, about so many other cookbooks. And is this your fourth solo cookbook? Or I don't know how many you have that you've done.
I have a bunch of other solo cookbooks. I like to say this is my kind of, I don't know, this is a big book for me. I mean, it's much more highly illustrated. There's so many more photos than any book I've ever done. So I'm very proud of this one. And I also think the focus, just focusing on dinner and really making it very specific will be helpful.
Well, and I think that is the biggest conundrum for most people is coming up with that great recipe for dinner. So you've co-authored a lot of other books with some celebrity chefs, some well-known chefs, and I know you've learned a lot from those experiences. And I think one of the things you mentioned, I was reading that you found that there's no right way to do anything. So tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, that is so true. You know, when you're starting out cooking, you think, oh, there's a technique. I must learn the technique of this is how you chop an onion and this is how you do garlic. And you strive to master that. But then when you go into other chefs' kitchens and you realize, well, wait, he's not doing it the way that my book told me I'm supposed to chop an onion. He's, you know, I'm supposed to go like this, but he's going like this, or he's roasting the chicken at high heat. I thought you were supposed to do it at low heat, or whatever it is. And then you realize that there's so many ways to get to dinner. And it gives you options. When you see the variety of the way people are cooking out there and you realize that there's not one right way, it gives you freedom to do it your way, first of all, and also increases your skill set. And you start to learn, okay, well, so that guy's roasting his chicken at 325 degrees, super low, because he wants a completely different flavor profile than the woman over there who's doing 450. And she wants it to be, you know, he wants a suppler flesh, he doesn't want crisp skin necessarily. He wants more savory. She wants crisper, you know, springier flesh. And they're both delicious and they're completely different. And that's okay.
So of all those cookbooks that you helped other people write because of your writing skills and everything, what was the biggest lesson you pulled away from those chefs and anyone in particular that really stood out for you that you worked with?
Oh, you know, I got something very special from each chef that I worked with. Claudia Fleming, who is one of my absolute favorites. She and I wrote a book called The Last Course. And Claudia was such an inspiration. She was one of the first people I ever wrote a co-author book. Not the first, but one of the early ones. And I think what I really learned from her was I learned the process of meticulous recipe testing. I had been testing recipes, but Claudia was never satisfied. And I would cook and cook and cook, and I'd bring her stuff and she'd say, no this and no that, and analyze each thing, and I'd test and I'd retest. And that process became my process. You know, I took away a way of working from working with her. And because of that, I am so careful with my testing because, you know, the last thing you want is for people to buy a bunch of ingredients and then invest all this time aside from money and then the dish not come out. And I don't want that to be on my watch with my recipe.
So testing so many of the recipes, how long did it take you to get this book together?
It's about 2 years.
Wow, that's a long process to put all this together. Well, it shows. I mean, it's really, really wonderful. So you write this regular food column. Tell us about the videos you put together. And I'm sure, and I think I mentioned it would be great to see some of your outtakes because some stuff must go on.
Oh my gosh, we even have somewhere in the Times archives, there is an outtake little video, you know, where I, you know, I was peeling a butternut squash and it gets really slippery. I use a vegetable peeler, which is a great tip for people. When you peel a butternut squash, a vegetable peeler will get the skin off. It's so thin. And anyway, but it also gets really slippery and I'm peeling it and it slipped out of my hands and hit the camera guy in the head. So that was a problem. But the videos have been great. They're really fun. We have a great crew. It's a hard day. It's 4 videos in a day.
Wow.
And, you know, it's a 12-hour day, but it's incredibly rewarding. And it is my house. It's my house.
Oh, wow. And so you're doing, this is once a week. These air, don't they?
Yeah, so we do one a month. So we.
Oh, okay.
Well, no, they're they air one a week, but we shoot one shoot day a month, so we can do 4 at a time. What you don't see is that the camera people have absolutely no room to maneuver because the kitchen may look big in the videos, but that is actually, that's all there is. It's New York City for you.
Okay. Well, you know, I read that you grew up in Flatbush in Brooklyn, and now you do still live there today.
Not in Flatbush, but still in Brooklyn.
Still in Brooklyn.
I'm nearby, though.
Right. But how have you seen that area has changed tremendously? And, you know, when I think about authors and illustrators, you just throw a rock and you'll hit somebody as a writer.
Yes. You know, when I was growing up in Brooklyn, it was the most embarrassing thing in the world. And I went to school in the city, and we were the bridge and tunnel kids. And now it's the cool, hip place to be. So I love, I mean, love the advantages of living in a hip neighborhood. You know, I mean, it's very expensive now, so that's not so great. But, you know, I have all the gourmet food shops, and I've got my farmer's market, and I have my beautiful park, and I mean, I'm a Brooklyn girl, you know, I love being there. But yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I think maybe I should move to Queens.
You know, where it's present,
less expensive, and, you know.
And I think that might be changing a little bit,
That's changing, too.
Yeah.
The Bronx.
So how did you start in food writing? I mean, how did that all come about for you?
I was a writer first. That was my first love. I always wrote. I wrote stories when I was a kid. And when I was writing, you know, I grew up in a foodie family. My parents are big cooks. They were Julia Child disciples. They had dinner parties where everybody would bring it. They called them their gourmet dinner parties, and everyone would bring a dish, and they'd all, you know, create a menu together, and there'd be a theme. And this was just so much part of my childhood, and it was just I was just steeped in it. So that when I started writing, in high school and in college, food just became my metaphor. I mean, everything I was writing was told through the lens of food. Food was a character. Food was in the room with me all the time. And so it finally dawned on me that maybe I should be writing about it, since it was it was the thing there, you know?
Yeah. Do you remember your earliest recollection of making something that actually turned out well? Or maybe making something with a parent or a grandparent?
I do remember some fails. I remember some big fails. More than, you know, the early things were... I thought I could do it because I watched my parents cook, but when I was little, you know, I couldn't really do it. Yeah. And I remember making this cake. I made a lot of sweet things because my parents were not so big on buying sweet things, so if I wanted something sweet, I had to make it myself. So I remember this cake, and it was purple, and we forgot to put the leavening in it, the baking powder or baking soda, and so it was flat as a pancake and utterly disgusting because it was colored, because it was purple. We put all this food coloring in, and then we made this frosting, and it was grainy and weird, and we loved it. We didn't care, but it was. I could see that it was a total failure, but I was also like, I made that. It's okay. And you know, even at an early age, I think I did one thing. I think I really learned that I still do is that I accept my failures with cooking. Like sometimes things don't come out, and that's okay. But sometimes things don't come out the way you expect, but maybe they're still okay. And in that case, just change the name. Yeah, so you know, my bitter eggplant salad is world famous, and you just set up people's expectations in a different way. That's my flat pancake cake, and I mean, you know, not quite, but you can really if you approach food, and you know, you're not afraid to have fun with it.
And I think you say that in the book too, about having fun with it, and also don't be afraid to try it and to get in there, because and you're talking about the time. Even as you do something more and more, you'll get more efficient.
Absolutely.
At what you're doing.
I think that's really true. I mean, don't expect to get it perfect the first time necessarily. Maybe you will, but you know, do it again, and then then it's yours. Yeah.
So you know, you got your undergraduate in English and then an MFA in creative writing, but you went to high school at Stuyvesant.
I did.
And you had Frank McCourt.
I did. Oh my gosh. Yes, going back.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Frank McCourt told me I was going to be a writer. Well, that was really, really meaningful. I remember, it's funny, talk about a metaphor. So I remember I wrote a story for him, and the character in the story, I compared her to cotton candy. And that was like this, it was like this theme, you know?
Right,
and but cotton candy, the kind of cotton candy that you get at a carnival, where it's really fluffy on the outside and then it's hard and sugary and weird on the inside and kind of crunchy and disturbing. And this was like this character that I was building.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. I remember that.
Yeah. So he knew your love of food, I think.
Yeah, well, I guess, I don't he saw something.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. Because, you know, there's a couple other authors that I've talked to who had him for a teacher, and what a difference it made.
Yeah, you know, especially I was at Stuyvesant. It's a math and science high school, and you know, you're desperate to find people who are interested in words and not numbers.
Right. For sure. So I know you've won a James Beard Award and also an IACP, which is the International Association of Culinary Professionals Award. Tell us about those awards and what that meant to you to win them.
You know, I won them really early in my career.
Oh,
it's
you
funny.
did?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I kind of, it was almost like, oh, wow, okay, it was for a co-authored book. Both of them were for a book I worked on with a chef named Peter Burley, who's a vegetarian chef, and we wrote a book called The Modern Vegetarian. Okay. And it's a great book. I learned how to make tempeh.
Hey.
And I learned how to make seitan. And that's, you know, pretty awesome.
Yeah. Oh, that's very cool. So cooking with your daughter, I know you have a daughter, and I
Yes.
know your husband helps out in the kitchen. So tell us a little bit about that and how she helps, and your husband, he does certain things within the kitchen when you're making something.
You know what he does, which is the best thing when I'm cooking? When he reads to me, oh my gosh, so I'll be cooking dinner and he'll read. We read the Aeneid and the Iliad.
Oh,
Well, they're meant to be read out loud anyway,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And so I'll be cooking and he'll be reading to me. And that's just like, talk about like the best part of my day. And we're drinking wine. And, you know, this was when Dahlia was really little, so she was not really, you know, part of the scene then. But,
sure, right.
But I love that. But he does also help. I mean, he's a good sous chef when I need him to be.
Great.
He was
That's
actually
good.
quite a good cook when we met and gave that up really. He's like, yeah, I used to cook, but then what do? You know, you
right.
marry her.
Yeah, right.
And Dahlia will cook anything sweet.
Yeah.
She'll get her little fingers in the sugar.
so just like you
so
were
just
when
like,
you-
yeah, I
yeah,
can relate.
right, yeah.
And she'll strip herbs and she makes her own salad. You give her the greens and the lemon wedge and the olive oil and the salt. She'll make her salad.
Okay.
She loves a salad.
Yeah.
I know, it's
great.
unusual for an 8-year-old, but I'm going to go
That's
with it.
wonderful. That's wonderful. So what are you working on next? Anything? Or this is the 2-year project, you know, it's finally out in the world, but anything you're working
Oh
on?
yeah, no, I always have the next project
Okay.
because, you know, you have that dead time in between when your book is done and then before it comes out and then you're like, now what am I going to do? So I'm working on 2 projects that I'm really excited about. And this in addition, of course, to my Times column, which I work on all the time, always, because I love it so. I'm working on a book that's going to be an electric pressure cooker book, like Instant Pot and all those. I'm going to do really interesting, well-tested recipes. I feel like there's a lot of recipes out there that are, so I want to try to do something seriously tested. So I'm working on that, and that is going to come out soon-ish.
Okay.
Quick deadline. And then I'm also working on a book about, it's a memoir as told through recipes about vacationing in France with my parents when I was a
wonderful.
kid. And so the title is First We Get Lost, Then We Have Lunch, which is exactly how it went when we went to France with my parents.
Oh, that sounds
drive around to the restaurant,
fantastic.
couldn't find, you know, days
Yeah,
before
right.
days before your iPhone, you know, it's like you
Yeah.
had the map.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds wonderful. Can't wait to see that. Okay, I end these interviews with a little quiz. Now,
Okay,
these are
okay.
all book related, so we're
Ooh.
going to add a few little, you know, cookbook kind of stuff in here. But since, you know, you are a reader, so what was your favorite book when you were a child?
Harriet the Spy.
Okay. How about, do you remember a cookbook from childhood?
Yes, I remember the Moosewood cookbook. I
Yeah.
loved the Moosewood cookbook when I was a kid.
Yeah. And do you have a cookbook that you really cherish? One that you own today that you really...
Well, I still have my original Moosewood, which is falling apart.
Yeah.
And you know, I mean, I also grew up on the Silver Palette cookbook. Like
Yeah,
that was
sure.
a really big influence on me. Really
Yeah.
important book.
Yeah.
And I mean, other than that, I have so many. And you know, I just keep collecting and keep collecting. I want to learn more and read more.
Okay, now we've all done this. Faked reading, especially a classic. Anything you've ever faked reading?
Yeah, a lot. Well, not that I faked reading, but you know, books I couldn't get through. Moby
Right.
Dick. Moby Dick.
Man, I hear that so many
I'm so
times.
sorry.
No,
I
no,
really,
no.
yeah.
That's
I mean,
incredible. I know.
I'm going to try
I know.
again. My husband
Moby
loves
Dick.
that book so much.
Yeah.
So many people.
Yeah.
I'm going to try again.
Okay, so this is a good question for you. Okay, if you could have dinner with 3 of your favorite authors and yourself, who would those 3 authors be, and who would be the chef for the dinner?
Okay, so dead or alive? Does it matter?
Doesn't matter. Dead or
Okay,
alive.
definitely Alice B. Toklas, and she can cook.
Oh my gosh, that's a good one. Yeah.
Knausgaard,
Okay.
Karlova.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Totally into his books.
Yeah.
Oh, and Elena Ferrante.
Okay, what was the last book you gave as a gift?
Other than my cookbook, which I give away a gift a lot.
Which is a great gift.
I did just buy somebody a book. Oh, I selfishly bought my husband the Knausgaard soccer book. So, and I bought Dahlia Lemony Snickets.
Okay.
In fact, and while I'm here in your store, I will be buying some more presents because I cannot go to a bookstore without
Okay.
coming home with a little treat.
And what are you reading now or read recently that you absolutely love?
So I'm reading Lauren Collins' When in French, and it's the book that she wrote. It's nonfiction. It's about her relationship with her husband, who's French, and she's a New Yorker writer. And there is an excerpt in the New Yorker that I absolutely love, and so I just picked up the book, and I'm very excited to. I just started it.
Okay. Well, great. A+, 100% on your quiz. Well, Melissa, thank you so much for sitting down and talking with me.
Oh, it
And
was a pleasure.
Thank you for dinner. You have solved it for so many of us. And this is an absolutely stunning book.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been great.
And please come back.
Absolutely.
Incredibly delicious conversation with Melissa Clark, who is a food columnist for the New York Times, and her new cookbook. You've got to get this one. It's called Dinner, Changing the Game. Great ideas for every night of the week. Thanks for joining me on Authors Reveal.